Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented, as always, by Full Press Coverage. You can find us on their website at fullpresscoverage.com, on Spotify, and wherever podcasts are. Basically, if you can hear it, we will be there. As always, joined by my co-host, John Sapichetti. Sap, what is going on, my friend?
Not too much. We're just gearing up for the Super Bowl. I know it has nothing to do with the NBA, but looking forward to this game.
They watch the Super Bowl,
They
too.
will absolutely watch. I remember one year, this is going back a long time ago, when I was covering the Celtics on a pretty much a daily basis. The Patriots were playing the Bears in the Super Bowl. You're too young to remember
Everybody
that.
remembers that.
Yep. It was only 46-10. This is back when the Patriots would get to a Super Bowl and get absolutely demolished by an all-time great team. But that afternoon, the 76ers were playing the Celtics because they'd always have a big NBA game early in the afternoon and then gear you up for the Super Bowl. And Dr. J, of course, was playing for the 76ers. And, everybody was asking who you're rooting for. And Dr. J was one of the classiest athletes I ever had the opportunity to meet. And he said, I've got to root for the Chicago Bears. He says, because I'm really good friends with Walter Payton, and he was in Boston. And,
it's a good enough reason.
It was just good enough reason. And of course, for some reason, Mike Ditka wasn't a big enough fan to give Walter Payton an opportunity to score a touchdown in that Super Bowl. Refrigerator Perry got a touchdown in that blow up, but not Walter Payton. And Walter Payton, I don't think ever forgave Mike Ditka for that oversight and was actually quite pissed after the Super Bowl, even though the Bears won 46-10. But this is an NBA podcast, so let's get to basketball, I guess.
Dr. J is in his, late 60s, early 70s right now?
Dr. J was born in 1950, so he's right around 70, 71. He's got the distinguished gray hair.
I heard he can still dunk a basketball.
Oh, sure.
I think he said he can still dunk.
Oh, I'm sure he can. He was, in his playing days, 6'6", 6'7", kind of built like Kawhi Leonard, similar body type to Kawhi Leonard, and also similar to Kawhi Leonard with enormous hands. That's one of the reasons he was so great at the dunk contest because he never feared losing the basketball. So, yeah, I'm sure Dr. J, I'm sure a lot of these, even these great old players, even if they're in their 60s or in Dr. J's case, 70 or 71, I'm sure they can still get up there. And
I feel like at one point your knees, when you come down, would just explode into dust, right? Wouldn't you think?
Yeah, well, that's us, Jet. You're much younger than I am. Me walking down a flight of stairs and stuff. Yeah, we're falling apart even at your young age and my advanced age. But, even walking down a flight of stairs can be problematic. But those are world-class athletes we're talking about.
It's certainly Dr. J, one of the greatest athletes the NBA, maybe the whole sports world has ever seen. I mean, really, just an unbelievable athlete. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if he can still dunk at 70 years old. Right. Which leads us perfectly, just couldn't have been a better segue into our first segment of the show today, Sap. You post oftentimes you ask bad questions on Twitter. Poll questions that are clearly leaning towards an answer you want. Favoritism towards LeBron James and Aaron Rodgers, your favorite athletes. True. This one, however, was a very good poll question, and you got good response on it. In fact, you had people even commenting on it saying, hey, what a great question. So a pat on the back for you, John Sapichetti, for such a terrific poll question, which was, who is the most influential NBA player of the last 30 years? Now, I can't give you all the credit because it was, I think, brought on by an ESPN or a Sports Illustrated post asking a similar question. But I still give you plenty of credit for, putting it out there in the Twitter sphere. You limited it to 30 years in your poll. We can talk about it a little bit further, who the most influential NBA player is since the NBA-ABA merger. I think you said you were looking at. In your initial poll, you had Jordan, Steph Curry, LeBron, and Kobe.
Right.
How come you started it with just those four? How did you pick those four? I'm curious.
Well, I kind of looked at it over the last 30 years, and I wish I could amend it to since the merger because that's 45 years. And also, is a wider breadth of players that you could select. And I've been trying to, for years, I tweet at Twitter. I haven't been suspended or thrown off Twitter like our former president. But I think that they should have the ability to give us more choices for polls in terms of more than 4 choices.
Yeah, if
I'd
you
like to
ran
see
for
maybe
president,
8.
this would be the top of
Be
your
the first
campaign
thing.
issues. Yeah.
Without question, the biggest issue in this country, the biggest issue facing everyone, not COVID or poverty or whatever, is that we can't get 8 or more on our Twitter polls. It's limited to 4,
problem.
so I'm very upset. It's a huge problem. It really bothers me whatsoever. So I went with those 4. And again, I kind of painted it as not just accomplishments on the court and great statistics or championships and business impact that they've had, but also other things like, social justice issues, how they've impacted the game, both with men and women. Wide scope. So it's up to you to interpret it. And, I did put LeBron James in there because I think he's in any discussion when you've limited it to 4, whether one of the greatest players ever, most influential players ever, or at least in the last 30 years. So I kind of painted it that way. I wanted to expand it to the merger, and I actually had 9 names that I came up with. No coaches, no commissioner. I mean, David Stern had a big impact on the sport. Just player. Let's stick with players. So the merger took place in 1976, so we're talking 45 years. And can I give you the 9 names I came up with chronologically?
Please. I have 8 names, so I'm curious if we have the same 8 and then you have +1.
Okay, so here it is in order chronologically. It's Dr. J.
Yep.
Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan, Allen Iverson, Kobe Bryant. Now, here's the surprise. He's not an all-time great player, but I think he was very influential. Yao Ming, LeBron James, Steph Curry. Those are my 9 candidates. Now, obviously, Shaq and Hakeem Olajuwon, Dirk Nowitzki, Kevin Garnett, Kevin Durant. I mean, I can name 10 players that are all-time greats, but I wouldn't call them as influential as these players in terms of not just what they accomplished on the court, but off the court. With Allen Iverson, there's a lot of the social cachet that he brought to the NBA. He changed how the NBA looked more so than any other player. It was cool to have tattoos. It was cool to have dreadlocks. It was cool to be kind of a rebel. It was also cool to be 5'10.5" and win a league MVP. So those are the 9 names I came up with in chronological order. Later on, I'll give you my order of importance. But who are your 8?
I do like that you mentioned Allen Iverson at 5'10". The Sixers listed it as like 6'4" every year. He wasn't close to 6'4". No. Some years he was 6'3". He was not 6 feet tall. He was not.
Yeah, I weigh 190 pounds myself. So
well, no one can see this right now, so they might believe.
Well, if you know me, I'm about 245, which is actually lower than it's been in many years. I'm working my way down. Yeah.
Congratulations, dude. Good. That's good.
Thank
good
you.
Health is important, Sap.
Yes. We got to keep doing this podcast for many years.
I have a similar list. Okay. Though I did not know at the time you were going to include to the merger, so I just took it as it was on Twitter past 30 years. If that were the case, if I were doing the merger, then yes, I would have included Dr. J, Larry Bird, and Magic Johnson. Mm-hmm. I did not include them because I was just looking at the scope of 30 years. Larry Bird played like 2 years of I'm 31. Larry Bird played till like 91.
92, he retired. Magic retired in 91 and came back for a bit.
If I'm looking at just 30 years, I can't put them in because I know to you it might seem like yesterday that they played, but to most people it seems like a long time ago.
It is. It's 30 years ago with those players.
So here's my list of the last 30. I'm not going to do chronologically because I just wrote them as it was. I'm not as good as you, Sap, at doing things in order. It's just a stream of consciousness for me. So I took the 4 that you had. Those were, I think, pretty obvious to me. LeBron, Jordan, Curry, Kobe. I don't really see any arguing with any of those in terms of influential on the court if you take the whole breadth of their careers on the court, off the court. Then I added 4 more. Allen Iverson. Mm-hmm. I agree with you. We'll get into that more about like the cultural aspect in a second. Shaq, I did add because I think that if you look at, I don't have him rated as highly as a lot of people do in terms of top 50 all time. He is in the top 50, but I don't have him. Maybe a lot of people have him in the top 10. I don't have him in my top 10.
I have him in my top 15 or right at 15.
But why he's in there for me is because he, I think, changed the way people perceive bigs in the NBA, especially in terms of marketability. that you can market bigs and that personality is important in the NBA. And he is, as you're seeing still today, one of the biggest personalities the league's ever seen. I mean, you can't turn on the TV without seeing him on some commercial for Icy Hot or whatever that Papa John's. I mean, he has a million endorsements.
He'll pitch anything.
Yao, I agree with you. I think incredibly influential. I wouldn't put him in my top 100 NBA players. I might not even put him in my top 200 NBA players, but the influence can't be denied. The NBA is the most popular sport in China, which is the biggest country in the world. That is in large part because of Yao Ming. And then the last person I put in there, Sep, was somebody you didn't have, Dirk Nowitzki. I think that he has been incredibly influential. You could make a case perhaps the most influential in terms of the amount of European players we see in the NBA now. And look at the league now. What's the prize position is those stretch bigs. And Dirk Nowitzki was one of the first bigs to start shooting threes on a regular basis. Garnett was another stretch big, but didn't really shoot threes. Dirk won a 3-point contest. He may have won 2 of them. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I know he won 1. So just a 7-footer who could shoot, and the European player, I guess you could call it a European invasion of the NBA. I think there were players before Dirk, and nobody nearly as great as Dirk Nowitzki. And so I think that he has been vastly influential.
Great list. It's a great list. In fact, Nowitzki,
I know. I feel very good about it.
I think they were all great lists. Nowitzki and Shaq were 2 other players that I wanted to put on there. With Nowitzki, and now I continue to screw up all the foreign names. Sometimes it's Nowitzki, sometimes it's Nowitzki. Let me just call him Dirk.
Yeah,
that
Dirk,
makes it a lot easier.
Better.
Dirk is
make it easier
good
for
enough.
Yourself.
Well, all these great players have one name, so it's Dirk. It's LeBron, it's Dirk, it's MJ's got the initials, Kobe. We can keep it to one name. So Dirk, the influence is incredible because now the European market opened up, and I think he was the biggest reason why. In terms of foreign players, Olajuwon to me was a greater player, but Olajuwon played college basketball at the University of Houston, so we knew who he was when he entered the NBA. In fact, he was the first pick in the '84 draft, 2 slots before Michael Jordan. So we kind of knew that Olajuwon was going to be a franchise player. Dirk went later in the first round, and he became a great player after several years, and then he just continued to stay a great player, won a championship, won a league MVP. He and Shaq were probably the 2 players that just missed out on my list. And again, that's impressive because I'm going a little bit deeper, 45 years rather than 30 years. And that kind of reflects our age. I mean, I really started watching basketball in the early 70s. You started watching basketball, I'm sure, by the mid 90s to the late 90s. So yeah, Bird, Magic, you can watch them on YouTube and hear stories from your dad or your uncles or from me about how great these players were. But for what you saw, that's a great list. And I'm glad you put Iverson on there because I'm of the belief that Iverson was one of your favorite players, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually still have the ticket stub from the first time he played the Celtics. I remember going to the game vividly with my dad. I think it was 1996 in the winter of 96. And being like, wow, this guy is fun to watch. I can't remember many more players who were more fun and just from a pure entertainment standpoint to watch than Allen Iverson. I mean, like you said, he was under 6 feet. He could dunk. He was the fastest guy on the court. He had incredible handles. He looked really cool doing it too, with the braids, sometimes with the afro. He was just an incredibly exciting player. His body would crash under the basket like multiple times a game. He just popped right back up. He was really just in terms of entertainment value, he gave you the full price of admission every single time. And like you said, I think if you talk to players who play in the NBA now, this generation of players, their favorite players and who motivated them to play basketball, Kobe and Iverson.
Yep.
And, Iverson, obviously, was not as good of a player as Kobe. In fairness, Iverson didn't get to play with nearly as good of talent as Kobe did. But I think we can agree, Kobe was the superior player. But it was just something about the way Iverson played and the way he looked and his attitude, even that practice rant, sort of just spoke to a lot of people and a lot of young people who decided they wanted to make basketball their passion and turn it into their career. And so I would venture if you polled the NBA guys now who their favorite player was, most would come back with Kobe, and
Mhm.
the rest would come back with Iverson. Maybe
Yeah, and it's
some would
not
say Shaq, maybe some of the bigs.
the bigs would, and none would say LeBron because LeBron
No, none would say
is.
LeBron.
They wouldn't because he's so unique. You can't possibly duplicate what he has on the court. There's never been a player like him. They like to make the comparison to LeBron and Michael Jordan. It's not a really good comparison. The comparison with Jordan, of course, is Kobe. The closest I can come to LeBron would be Magic Johnson, but he's bigger, stronger, faster, a better shooter, a better rebounder, and a better defender.
And I think with LeBron,
and I'm not being hyperbolic there either.
No, you're not.
He's a better version than Magic Johnson with way more athletic ability. When you talk about Iverson, I think a modern comp for Iverson was a more skilled, refined version of Russell Westbrook, right? Because a lot of players today really respect Russell Westbrook, how much he just leaves it out all on the court. I know he's one of your favorite players.
Yeah,
he's
Westbrook
not one of
was
my
more
favorite
athletic,
players. More athletic than anybody.
not as fast.
Not as fast and not as refined as a basketball player.
Yeah,
like Iverson was a dead-eye outside shooter. He could do more things at a higher level than Westbrook. But the way they carry themselves on the court, that they were out there to win.
Fashion being a big part of it too.
Fashion a big thing
guys
as well. Yeah, and Iverson and my niece's husband, who's a little bit older than you and loves the NBA. His favorite player growing up was Allen Iverson. He
was one of mine too. As a short guy too,
exactly,
and I am drawn to other short players.
Right.
I mean, he was one of my basketball idols for sure. I mean, could I do
I'm
anything remotely similar to him on the court? I could flop.
Yeah,
that's about it.
That's about it. And I kind of associate myself with LeBron because we have similar body types. I have 3 to 4%, body fat. I carry my 245 pounds quite well. He's a foot taller than me, but other than that, we're pretty similar.
My favorite jersey growing up was I had a throwback black 76ers Allen Iverson jersey.
I'm so glad you put him on the list, and I feel like a millennial because I put him on the list too. I don't think there's a lot of 57-year-old guys that are going to put Allen Iverson on a list of the most influential players of the last 30 or 45 years.
So, he may not be.
I respect the hell out of him.
He may not be in the top, 25 players of all time, but if you're looking at the influence you're taking, again, we're doing the whole breadth of the influence of the player. I think the way he played, the style he played, and sort of his unapologetic, non-conformity, I guess, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is something that really spoke to a lot of people, not just players who are playing in the NBA now, but people who became NBA fans. I mean, the reason the NBA put in David Stern overreached in, I think, everybody's opinion and put in the dress code was mainly because of Allen Iverson, because he would wear other teams' throwback jerseys on the bench.
Which is always interesting. Yeah,
that's just funny. And, he would be wearing, the backwards hat and the football jerseys at press conferences, which, that's his prerogative. Anybody should be able to wear whatever they want. But David Stern didn't like it. But I think it also spoke to, listen, we're both white guys. I think Allen Iverson embraced the being black part of being in the NBA and was unapologetically black, which speaks to a lot of people. And that I think that a lot of people really appreciated that. And it really influenced a lot of people to love the game of basketball. And like I said, a lot of people to pursue it as a career.
I also think too, with Iverson, he was so loyal to his friends to the point of being too loyal to his friends that it may have hurt him at some point.
Bad with money. Yeah. Not
bad with money. And I remember when he won his MVP, he showed up to the MVP ceremony wearing like a sweatsuit. And people were like, well, why is he showing up wearing a sweatsuit? And the reason he wore the sweatsuit is because his friends bought it for him. To show his loyalty to his friends, he wore the sweatsuit, which I think was a pretty cool thing. But yeah, I'm glad we both have him on there. Now, do you want to hear, and you're going to be shocked at this, although I shouldn't tease it like that, but do you want to hear my list 1 through 9 of the most impactful? Because you're going to be shocked. You're going to be shocked at this. Okay, so
I have a clear one. I don't know if yours was ended up being clear cut or not.
It's close, but it's I would call it somewhat sizable. I wouldn't call it clear cut, but I think that he's won, and I don't think he's ever going to be surpassed in terms of influential. But of the 9 I selected, Yao Ming would be number 9. I thought he was kind of like an outlier that I put him in there And look, basketball is the most popular sport in China, and 20% of the world's population reside in China. So, he does have a major influence on the international state.
Quickly on the Yao Ming thing, because we don't have to spend a lot of time on him. Mm-hmm. The opening up to China is huge, obviously, from a marketing perspective,
right?
And growing the game. I will say I am surprised there hasn't been another successful Chinese basketball player since Yao Ming. Considering the popularity, considering the sheer size of the country, and considering how important sports are to them. Look at the Olympics. I mean, they train these guys and girls from when they're like 2 years old. I'm surprised there has not been another viable NBA player from China.
Great point. Yeah, I mean, they just haven't produced
which
anyone
I think
close
knocks
to
Yao down a little bit of a peg, honestly.
It may, right. And sometimes that's out of his control. I put Iverson at number 8, again, because he's not quite at the level of these other players that I have above him. So that's kind of like the tiebreaker is the better player. I got Kobe at number 7. I've got Dr. J at number 6. Steph at number 5. And the thing with Steph is he's impacting not just men's basketball, he's impacting women's basketball. Like, you poll any high school or collegiate basketball player who their favorite player is. I think the older ones or the ones that have been out of school for a little bit would say Kobe Bryant, but the rest of them would say Steph Curry. I mean,
he's the most similar player to like that whole, like, I want to be like Mike movement in the 90s. Everybody wants to be like Steph Curry and models their game after him now. I'd say of all the players in the NBA, he is probably the most copied of players you see in college or high school right now. And I don't think it's close. I think everybody shoots threes now because of him.
He's changed the game. Number 4 and number 3, these two guys are constantly associated with each other. Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. They came into the league together. They revitalized the two biggest franchises in the sport, the Lakers and the Celtics, right? I mean, the Lakers hadn't won a championship for 7 years. The Celtics hadn't won one for 3, but they were both down when Bird and Magic came into the league, and that rivalry existed through the 80s. So I put Bird at 4, Magic at 3. They were so influential, and they also made it cool to pass. The league at that point was looked at as a selfish league, like just, get as many points as you can. Let's not be playmakers. And Bird and Magic were all about winning. They were all about making their teammates better. Now, they had teammates were already great, whether it be Kareem or, Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish that came a year into Bird's career. So they had great talent around them, but I put them there. Number 2 for me is LeBron James. And that's why I think you're going to probably be surprised that I have Jordan number 1, knowing that I'm the biggest LeBron James fan. I think he is a better basketball player than Michael Jordan. I will debate that with anyone, especially if he wins another title or 2. I think the case will clearly be made. But I don't think there's been an athlete ever that has the impact of Michael Jordan. He's been out of the league since 2003. He is still the most popular athlete in America. Not Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes or LeBron James or any of these all great athletes. It's still Michael Jordan is the most popular. He makes $160 to $170 million a year from Nike. Nike was built because of Michael Jordan. Yeah. He built I'm just going to swear there. He built an entire
I think we can swear. We're not on FCC regulations.
He built a goddamn, brand that's one of the biggest in the world, right? Nike. I mean, he's had as much impact on Nike as Steve Jobs had on Apple. So,
just look at the NBA right now. First of all, their jersey sponsors Nike. Some jersey sponsors are Jordan. The guy who played in the NBA is on a lot of the jerseys.
Yeah, and again, LeBron is more my cup of tea because he goes into social issues way more than Jordan ever did, and Jordan he's starting to dip his toe into it a little bit. He kind of contributed $100 million over the summer, over a 10-year period, which is fantastic. LeBron's big in education. He's the first athlete you think of when there's some sort of social injustice that needs to be addressed. It's usually LeBron James that weighs in on it and is very articulate about it. He's also made the league so mobile. Great players say, you know what? I'm going to go to a better situation. I always say that LeBron has made the game mobile. Michael Jordan made it global. I mean, just think back, and you were probably 3 at the time, but you know the history of the Dream Team. That was a phenomenon. That was the Beatles on steroids, and the sport just grew because of Michael.
The most famous person
Jordan
in the world.
Right? So he's up there with like Muhammad Ali, Michael Jordan. Babe Ruth, whatever the case is. And Muhammad Ali may not be the greatest boxer of all time. I think that Sugar Ray Robinson was the greatest boxer of all time, but the most influential boxer of all time, Muhammad Ali, the most influential baseball player, Babe Ruth. You get what I'm going after. So without question, in my opinion, it's Jordan, then LeBron. And I don't think anybody's ever going to
wide gap. I have it as Jordan.
It's pretty wide.
I agree with you. I mean, I agree with you that it's Jordan by a country mile. I mean, he's secretariat in the
right.
Whatever race secretariat won.
He
won a bunch, right?
31 lengths, which is about 8
You're
seconds,
a horse racing guy.
Oh, yeah. I probably bet secretariat that day. I was 10 years old. And
you were at the tracks at 10 years
I was at the track that day. Yes, I had some bad habits at a very young age, Jeff.
I have Jordan by, like I said, a country mile at 1. You just can't overestimate that he made, again, like you said, the game global. I think that's a great way to put it. He created access to the NBA in virtually every country in the world because, I mean, he was just a phenomenon. The most popular shoe is his Jordan brand shoe. His jersey is still among the most popular jerseys being sold today, 20 years after he retired. He had cameras following him every single place he went, including minor league baseball. I mean, he was the first person to get minor league baseball games have, massive TV viewing numbers. That's how influential he was. To watch what were they? The Barons. That was his team. His minor league, the White Sox AA affiliate.
Yep.
With Terry Francona as the manager. Everything he did, was highly followed by everybody because he, again, was the most famous person on the planet. Yes, he has not weighed into politics all that much. I think it just doesn't matter when you're talking about influence in terms of how many people wanted to play basketball or even know what basketball is because of Michael Jordan. Right. The NBA wouldn't be a fraction of what it is right now without him. So, I mean, he is my number one by far. As far as the other guys too, I think LeBron certainly has a massive, massive influence in terms of, yes, now is the era of player mobility. He started that with his move to Miami, and now you see it every offseason is a bonanza of player movement in the NBA. The political stuff I look at is interesting because while he is outspoken, there's a lot of players who are outspoken. He wasn't the first. He won't be the last. And I don't see – he's put his money where his mouth is in terms of the school stuff, which I think is amazing. He's, the I Promise school and stuff like that. Though I don't see that besides that, he's had particular influence in the political realm. His endorsement doesn't seem to have mattered. He famously endorsed Hillary Clinton in Ohio. She lost Ohio. I don't think it made a lick of difference. In fact, it may go the other way, which I guess speaks to being influential, that people revile you so much that they vote against what you want to do. If I'm looking at guys who were the most on-court influential, to me, it's Curry. It has the most tried, like I said, to be replicated game. And I think I stand by Dirk. If I had to say whose game is who influenced a lot of players now, it's Dirk. He would probably be even a greater player now because they'd let him shoot more threes.
Oh man, absolutely. Yeah. And again,
and look at the great players we're getting from Europe, Sap. I mean, last year, the All-Star game and the All-NBA teams were highlighted by guys from Europe. Giannis is from Greece. I know he was born in Africa, but he grew up in Greece. Luka Doncic is one of the greatest players in the NBA right now. He's from Slovenia. Where the hell is he from?
Yeah, Croatia? Slovenia. Yep.
No, and Nikola Jokic. Countless European superstars. Dirk paved the way for them.
Daniel Tice, not to forget him.
Dennis Schroeder, you can't forget
Dennis Schroeder, German Rondo. But no, you're right.
Maxi Kleber.
Yeah, so many guys.
The list goes on.
Yes, the Celtics have had so many great European players. It's mind-boggling. It's almost like, for some reason, the Celtics don't really go after European players and the Bruins don't go after like Russian players for whatever reason. That might explain why they haven't won a lot of championships recently. But I think that, Dirk, incredible influence on the game, without question. And Steph, as you said, on the court, LeBron hasn't necessarily had much.
No, you can't replicate what he does. It's impossible.
You can't replicate. He's a unicorn.
That's the problem. And I think that's why he's not, if you ask anybody who their favorite player is, even when we see new players, fast forward 20 years in the future,
Right.
and you ask rookies, who's your favorite player? I don't think any of them are going to say LeBron, or very
No,
few.
it might be Kyrie Irving at that point.
There's
or it might
nothing
be,
you can replicate about
no,
LeBron's game. And I
no.
think that's why a lot of people look at it as different. And I want to talk about Kobe because Kobe has just been massively influential in a second.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you look at LeBron and you look at the difference between him and like Kobe or Jordan, as you say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, LeBron's body type, just unrealistic. He's like 1 in, 8 billion.
He's
Nobody
a
has that
superhero,
type
right?
of body
I mean,
type.
you love superheroes. He looks
That's just
like he was
freakish.
carved out of stone.
And to be able to, the hand-eye coordination,
Mm-hmm.
he's really just truly unique. And so, listen, he puts in the work. Nobody can deny that. But I think a lot of people look at it on the surface and go, well, this guy was on the cover of Sports Illustrated when he was a
Right.
junior in high school. He was the number 1 pick in the draft. All of his games were on TV when he was in high school. Mm-hmm. He had it basically. He won the genetic lottery. That's
Mm-hmm.
true. He also puts in the work. A guy like Kobe, though, his dad played in the NBA overseas, marginal NBA player. He was solid, nothing special. Jelly Bean Bryant.
Yep.
And Jordan, his parents were both athletes, nothing, to write home about. And so I think a lot of the perception is, one, their body type, much more realistic. There's a lot more people with Michael Jordan's body type, not athleticism, but that look like Michael Jordan
type, right.
or Kobe Bryant. Not far less people that look like LeBron James. And so I think people look at it and go, wow, if I put in the work like these guys did, I can, be a reasonable facsimile of their game. Obviously, they're kidding themselves. But if you look at LeBron, you're saying there's no human way, no amount of work I could possibly put in to do anything that he does on a basketball court. Yeah, and so that's why I say Kobe is more influential in terms of on the court stuff.
Oh, on the court, absolutely. Yeah, no, without question. And it's almost like an actor, right? Like, so if you're a young actor, you look at other actors or the veteran actors that you look up to, and generally, who is it? It's I'm going to go old school here and say it's like Robert Duvall or it's Philip Seymour Hoffman, may he rest in peace. But actors like that who aren't matinee idols. You don't say George Clooney, who's, I think, a very accomplished actor, because very few people are as good looking as George Clooney. You see where I'm going here? You look at the craftsman, the person that, maybe I can duplicate what they do. People think they can be Steph Curry. What's Steph Curry? 6'2", 6'3"? I mean, if you walk down the street, you wouldn't even
string beans
look at him twice. Yeah, just a basic looking young guy that looks younger than he is. If LeBron walked into a restaurant, you'd say, that guy's somebody. I mean,
that guy's in the NBA.
That guy's got to be in the NBA, right? Yeah, where Steph Curry and again, Kobe and Jordan both about 6'6", so they're tall, but they don't have like freakish bodies. So yeah, I think to duplicate what LeBron's done over 18 years is nearly impossible. But it's a fun list. I mean, there's no wrong answer in it, and I think we both came to a sensible agreement that nobody tops Michael Jordan.
What I think is really important in talking about Kobe is, obviously him passing away at a young age is going to be the same sort of influences like James Dean passing away at a young age. It's that makes you immortal in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Because the legend only grows. But what I think is really interesting about Kobe and why I think he should be extremely high on anybody's list if you're talking about most influential, not just the on-court accomplishments, because those are, well-versed, but that his brand, his Mamba brand, has proliferated to every sport.
Right.
Period. You hear football players talking about Mamba mentality in their press conferences. I heard it last week after the championship games. You heard that. You hear it. I've heard hockey players reference it. Obviously, almost every basketball player references it. I'm sure if baseball players were allowed to express themselves at all, they would probably decry their admiration for Kobe Bryant. I'm sure lacrosse players probably think it's soccer players freaking love Kobe Bryant. I saw a ton of them with 24 on the back of their jerseys right after he passed away. They wear, the Kobe armbands and stuff. So Kobe's brand, second to Jordan, has proliferated to other sports. Jordan's brand's proliferated to, you see freaking tennis players with Jordan brand stuff on.
It's the whole world.
But Kobe's I'd say maybe less brand. Maybe I misspoke there. More philosophy, right? That really grit your teeth, put in the work, do whatever it takes to win sort of mentality, the Mamba mentality, whether that is an accurate description of Kobe throughout his career. You can debate, but that's now going to be the legend and the constant perception of Kobe. And it'll only grow over time.
And I think Tom Brady probably associates himself more with that than any other basketball player. And ironic thing is Tom Brady's actually a year older than Kobe Bryant would have been, which is just, again,
No one
another
believes that
tidbit that you throw out there about Tom Brady, that he's, older than Kobe Bryant would have been if Kobe was still alive. So, yeah, no, fascinating list. And the thing, too, about Kobe, I will say this. I think of all the great players of all time, and it's interesting we didn't have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar on here. You obviously doing it for a 30-year period. Even me, I mean, he was still a dominant player after the merger. But again,
don't think you can replicate what
you
he
can't
did on the court.
replicate that size and that skill.
Someone
it's like Wilt Chamberlain's, those guys are just like, okay, that's great to look at, but I can't even associate myself with that. But I will say this, that I think Kareem and Kobe are the two most worldly players of modern times. Like,
sure,
in terms,
Kobe spoke like 5 languages.
5 languages,
and like purposely learned other languages to trash talk
right
people.
Yeah, he was very exactly. So he would make sure that every player on the court knew what he was going at. And he grew up cultured. He grew up with money. And Kareem grew up in the 60s where it wasn't always cool to speak out on social injustices, and to the point now where Kareem's writing op-ed pieces for the New York Times.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you want to expand the list to the
right,
you'd have Kareem, you'd have Bill Russell, obviously,
Bill Russell, all those guys, exactly,
and Bob Cousy,
even
in terms
Bob
of
Cousy,
on the court stuff.
Yep.
Not so much the off the court, but I mean, he was the first person to start dribbling with 2 hands, basically.
Yeah. And again, I got to meet Bob Cousy on several occasions. He's 6'1". He's not that small, and he has humongous hands. And people would say, "Oh, he could never play today." I go, "No, he's 93 years old. But if he was at the proper age now, he would be an NBA player. He'd be a lot like John Stockton was.
If you handed him a basketball, he might topple over now. But
he may. But you hand him a basketball back then, and he figured it out.
I think it's a great conversation. It's a topic that, can be endlessly debated, though I think that we've come to a pretty solid agreement that Jordan stands on that mountain peak of influential NBA players. Even if you expand it to all time, I just, the access he created to basketball, I just don't think can be debated. So less on history now, Sap, and a little bit on current events. LeBron James, in the span of 1 week, has had 2 incidents with fans where they've gotten kicked out of arenas. First was in Cleveland, his old stomping grounds. Some maybe inappropriate signage was on the court. Not particularly clever signage, I'll say. I think it was like Le Blowjob and like Le Bitch or something like that. Nothing very creative there. He had them tossed from that game, those fans. Then the bigger story came a few days later in Atlanta, with the woman now being dubbed as Courtside Karen. Incident where she was literally saying, by the way, why are you selling courtside seats during a pandemic? That makes no sense to me at all. I understand Atlanta, Georgia, it might be a blue state now. It's still Georgia, so they're not going to have very strict COVID regulations.
No.
They have fans in the arena, not a lot, but some, and some of them can sit courtside apparently, which seems just silly to me. But that's neither here nor there. LeBron and this woman got into it a little bit after her husband was heckling LeBron. Unclear exactly as to what was said prior to the incident that got caught on cameras. LeBron and her had words. There was some swearing, some not nice name calling. Ultimately, the woman and her husband were kicked out of the arena. She has since apologized, saying, "To say things escalated quickly at yesterday's game is an understatement, and I want to apologize for losing my cool and removing my mask in the heat of the moment. For these things, I take full responsibility." And that's a strikingly different tone from the first tone she took, which is when she immediately went to Instagram Live after getting booted from the game, in which she said basically she would beat up LeBron James if he wanted to take her on. I don't know if she'd have much of a chance, but I will say this, she's a very confident young woman. She was obviously still a bit inebriated at the time. 24 hours later, coming down from whatever was in her system, I have a serious suspicion it wasn't just alcohol, that she, again, apologized. She didn't look particularly good or classy in the incident. LeBron didn't look particularly great in the incident, especially off of the heels of another getting fans booted from an arena. I'm curious, Sap, before I get into my thoughts on it, what are your whole thoughts about the situation, specifically the one in Atlanta, because that caught a lot more attention? And where do you stand on fans heckling players in 2021?
I've sat courtside. I mean, throughout the 80s, I was able to sit courtside at Celtic games, but I was working. They used to put us, members of the press, I used to sit on the baseline, like 10 feet from the basket. It was just
Lucky
incredible
you.
to
Ooh
be
la
there.
la.
It was phenomenal. I mean, remember when Bird stole the ball? I was like right there, and then he fed
And were you
DJ
more
for the winning
svelte then,
basket.
Sap, so you weren't taking up as much space?
I was more svelte, but they always would give me a really good seat on the end, so I had a little extra room there. Of course,
That's nice,
as a member of the media, I'm not clapping. I'm not, doing anything. I'm not talking to the players. It's not what you do. I think that the NBA is the only
what if
league
you're
that,
Bill Simmons? Then you might do that.
Yeah, then you can, but he's worth a couple $100 million, so I guess he can do whatever he wants. The NBA is the only sport where the fans are that close. I mean, hockey, there's the plexiglass separating the fans from the play, which is thankfully is what the NHL does. Baseball, the fans would whatever they are, most of them are half asleep.
They just keep setting them back further and further.
You have to keep back in their cardboard cutouts, so who cares? Football, we saw a little incident a couple of years ago when the Chiefs came to Foxborough and the fan threw beer at Tyreek Hill after a touchdown. So you don't see that much in the NFL. I mean, you got the Lambeau Leap in Green Bay, but that's kind of a fun thing.
At a football game.
It's too loud, and most of the fans are drunk, and it's cold, and people aren't, you're not that close. The NBA, there's been some issues with this. I mean, a couple of years ago, Russell Westbrook had the problem in Utah.
Donovan Mitchell had a problem, I think.
So
too.
Look, I'm not big on heckling. If it's in good nature, that's fine.
I love it. I love heckling.
Yeah. So if it goes with that, I never would do it, even when I was a kid, not covering games. But if it starts to go overboard, then I've got a problem with it. Obviously, I think everybody does. I remember Marcus Smart when he was at Oklahoma State, when in the stands after the fan. I'm assuming the N-word was thrown out by the fan at some point.
Yeah, it seems hard to believe it wasn't.
Right. So that would set me off if I'm a player. I don't think that happened in Atlanta. It appeared that LeBron and the guy who's 31 years older than his wife, which, God bless him. He's 56. She's 25. He's a very wealthy guy. But he and LeBron were just kind of going back and forth. And then she got in it, and it kind of escalated from there. LeBron did say after the game that he didn't think it warranted them being ejected from the game. But I think it just goes back to, especially in a pandemic, what the hell do you have fans that close to the court for? She's not wearing the mask. She's yelling. I mean, we've got to be more careful about COVID than that. So LeBron, yeah, I think he has, rabbit ears. I think he's a sensitive guy. He comes from a different generation. Heck, I remember going to a Georgetown game back in the 80s at the old Garden, and I won't even want to repeat or tell you what was said to Patrick Ewing.
Yeah, that was a nasty incident.
It was beyond
shameful.
I mean, it was just
a shameful incident.
Yeah, banana peels, and it was just gross. I mean, today that would have been the lead story on the nightly news. It would, back then it was like, oh, look at this. This was kind of weird. But so yeah, I think the players today are probably a little bit more sensitive because they're more socially active and they haven't been exposed to as much as, say, God knows what was said to Magic Johnson, especially when he came back after
don't want to
being
imagine.
HIV positive. I don't even want to know.
Especially by Karl Malone. He had some nasty things to say.
Karl Malone, one of my least favorite great players. Probably my least favorite great player. I think he's slightly overrated. So that one, I don't think the fan should be ejected at that point to say either cool it or then we're going to eject you. Give it a chance to de-escalate and put the fan in its proper place. So the one in Cleveland, I think there was an executive from the Cavaliers that was getting in the middle of something with LeBron, and LeBron then proceeded to hit 4 threes after that.
That's classy from the executive of the Cavaliers.
Right. I mean, there's still, he's left twice. He did win a championship for you. So, you just never really, especially his first time in Cleveland, you didn't surround him with anything. So he decided to leave. So that stuff is a little bit, and if you've got signs with, you got to they're not witty. They're kind of tasteless. I know at Fenway, they take down just about any sign, but they're hypersensitive at Fenway.
Oh yeah.
Park.
They take one that say go Red Sox at Fenway.
It's like, this is very offensive. Go Red Sox. Very offensive.
The G in go is slightly larger. That's very offensive.
It's not good. Can't do that. But again, LeBron is a lightning rod, right? I mean, if this was another player, it'd be like, well, whatever, because it's LeBron.
See an overly sensitive guy, Sap?
Yes.
More sensitive than the average bear.
I would say so. No, he's first of all, he's a very aware guy. Like I think he understands the settings. Like Tom Brady. That's what makes Tom Brady the greatest quarterback ever. I think he just sees everything. And I think LeBron sees and hears everything. And sometimes he doesn't shut it out. Look, I think sometimes it just motivates him to go nuclear on teams, which I'd like to see more of. Sometimes he's passive, and we know he's passive aggressive with some of his comments. But yeah, I mean, if it's done in taste, fine. But if it starts to get racial, that's a big issue. That can't happen.
Nope.
And, especially now in a pandemic, let's maybe sell the seats a little further away from the court. Then that might,
Yeah, honestly, that's one of my biggest takeaways from the whole thing. Yeah. It's like, what are the Hawks doing? Why are they selling those seats? I mean,
they're the Hawks.
It doesn't make any sense. Here's where I stand on it, Zap. Racial, homophobic, and family all off limits. If you say anything if you're heckling somebody about their family, their race, or being homophobic, goodbye. You get tossed, and I don't mind a ban, depending on how over the line you go with that sort of stuff. I really don't mind a ban. If you're going to mock their game, the way they're playing, how I even don't care if you want to call someone lanky, make fun of how they look. Again, as long as it's not racial, I don't have a problem with that. FUing somebody, I don't have a problem with that. As long, again, as you don't cross a line. Like if LeBron hits a big shot and you want to FU LeBron, say, F you LeBron, screw you, because he hit the shot. I honestly don't have a big problem with that. I think, especially in basketball, trash talk is so ingrained in the culture of basketball.
It is.
That if you ever played at a park growing up, you heard trash talk from who you're playing against. It's just part of the game. I think it's not just LeBron. I think a lot of players right now have become far too sensitive with some of the trash talk. Again, the caveat is obvious. If it's racial, if it's about family, if it's homophobic, that's crossing the line. If you want to rag on somebody during the game, tell them they suck, make fun of their game, when they miss a shot, yell brick, go for it. I think go for it until, the final buzzer sounds. I have zero problem with it. And I think bringing it to the referee's attention is lame of players if that's what they're doing. I know LeBron said that he doesn't think they should be kicked out, but he did bring it to the referee's attention. I don't know what the woman said necessarily. I don't know what the husband said beforehand. It could have been crossing the line. I totally, especially considering they were both drunk. And like I said, I venture to guess, considering the wealth, that they were probably on something else that wasn't just wine or beer at the game. So I think that LeBron, if they didn't cross the line, he should have just let it go. That being said, also, when she brought her mask down during a pandemic, then that's bring it to the ref's attention. Toss her, or move them back. Sorry, move them back before you toss them. Say it to her once. If she keeps doing it, move them back. If she's crossing the line, toss them from the game. And I think that going forward, we're going to see arenas be full again. And you're going to hear heckling again, and players are going to have to deal with it. If it's not crossing the line, they're just going to it's part of sports. And I think it's bad for the sport to eliminate it, in any sport, to eliminate it completely.
Can it be too that pretty much all the players in the NBA now grew up in the AAU culture where they're all friends with each other? So there's probably not as much trash talking now as it was, say, 10, 15 years ago.
I think it depends where you grew up too.
Right. If you grew up in the inner city and you played on a playground, that's part of the game. If you grew up, look, these basketball players today, you kind of knew they were going to be great players. There's not a lot of surprises, right? There aren't guys that, were sitting on the bench as a junior in high school and all of a sudden 3 years later, they're an NBA All-Star. That doesn't work that way. So they've kind of been built and created knowing that they're going to be elite players. So they may be a bit protected, more so than players of yesteryear. So that's important. I'm just going to relay a story that, there was a couple stories. You remember, I think it was about 15 years ago, Antoine Walker was going at it with a fan at TD Garden, and they finally threw the fan out. And I knew that guy. I knew that guy's brother. And I can tell you that guy was a piece of crap and should have been ejected. And I think they took his tickets away from him going forward. It was over the top. But my favorite athlete of all time is Barry Bonds. So in 2001, actually 2 weeks before 9/11.
No one ever
heckled
friends, him.
No one. Oh my man, that guy. He enjoyed it though. He was talk about Mamba mentality and like being a sociopath. He actually enjoyed it. He used to say, "Look, how cool is it that 56,000 people at Dodger Stadium are all booing me? This is awesome." And then he'd proceed to hit a double or a home run or whatever. I remember when he was at Fenway Park in 2007, his only appearance there. First time he got up, I've never heard a crowd boo an individual remotely close to that. Everybody in the stands had an asterisk. They were holding up. In fact, the guy sitting next to me goes, "Hey, you want one?" I go, "No, he's my favorite player." And I just went.
You were wearing a Giants hat.
I was wearing a Giants hat. And they were both.
You had the eye black on.
I had the eye black on. And somehow I railed about Dick Cheney. I go, no one has a problem with Dick Cheney, who somehow lost $9 billion of American taxpayers' money during a war. I don't know what led me into that.
I'm sure that really resonated with the Fenway crowd.
Well, because people are like, what's this guy talking about? But before that, 6 years before that, it was a couple of weeks before 9/11. So we go down to Shea Stadium, and the Giants are playing the Mets on a Monday afternoon game. And Barry went 3 for 4 that day with a walk and a home run. He always would have big games when I was present. Saw him play about a dozen times. I think he hit 8 or 9 home runs.
Clearly his lucky charm.
He
really struggled without you.
He knew his only fan in North America was there to see him. So he's playing left field at Shea Stadium. And about 25,000 people there, which at Shea Stadium looks pretty empty. It would seat about 55,000. So we're down between third base and left field corner. So, decent seats and not too far from where Bonds is in left field. And there was several sections that were pretty empty, except for this one guy who would not shut up. And he was going at it with Bonds, and Bonds was great with him. And the guys like yelling at him, saying, "Barry, why don't you?" Because he was going to be a free agent at the end of the year. He says, "Barry, why don't you come to New York? $10 million a year." And Bonds just looked at him and kept raising his hand as if to say, "Now you're going to have to pay me more than that." And then it was playful for a while, but then it turned, and it turned into like racial stuff, homophobic stuff. Like, don't you want to have a parade on Broadway as opposed to with all the gay people in San Francisco? And I'm holding back on a lot of things that were said. Finally, I think the fans were getting sick of him and, let security know, and they escorted the guy out. And Bonds was like laughing because he enjoyed
it out.
He tuned it out and actually played along with it and then proceeded to go 3 for 4 with a home run, a double, and a single. He almost hit for the cycle. So, but his mentality was different than, say, LeBron's mentality. And the players today in the NBA, and I love them. I think this is the greatest group of players we've ever seen in this sport. I mean, when we talk about the All-Star game, there's going to be probably 10 worthy players not make the All-Star game. The league is loaded. I love the players. But I think they may be a little bit a little softer, not necessarily on the court, but in terms of that give
They
and
don't
take
do well with
fans.
criticism.
They
either.
don't. And didn't Adam Silver say this last year? He goes, "I've got to figure out what's wrong with my league where all these young guys are so unhappy." And I think he was talking first about like Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. They're fighting with people on Twitter. Durant has a burner account or several burner accounts. They're not a happy group.
No, and they really struggle with criticism.
Yeah, they're dour, and that's not good, because I think we're going to see in the Super Bowl, the best quarterback in football right now, Patrick Mahomes. He plays with like this unbridled joy. I mean, he just is having the time of his life out there. And sometimes with the NBA, it seems like they get the weight of the world on their shoulders. So, I don't think that's going to hurt the sport, but it may turn some people off, and that's not good.
Well, look, the players now are constantly fighting with that TNT crew of Barkley and Shaq. Oh. And some things Barkley and Shaq say, are just a little bit get off my lawn, which, that's fine. It drives viewership. That's their job. But some of their criticisms, I think, are fair, and the players just do not respond well to them at all.
No.
It is, and I'm the same age as a lot of these players. I'm 31, right. So, I'm right in the same age bracket as a lot of these guys. And I would like to think that I handle criticism a little bit better, and that I grew up, as a very competitive person. I was never great at sports, but I always, tried to compete. And if, my coach was saying I wasn't doing something right, I would try to change it.
Right.
Maybe they take coaching, and that's something different than taking criticism from a talking head. But it just seems like whenever anybody has something, not nice to say about a way they played or a game or their defense or something like that, they immediately lash out on Twitter.
Right.
LeBron, who is older than me, is chief among them.
Sure.
And sort of relishes ripping on people. He also made up that whole narrative that people were saying he was like the washed king and he was washed up. No one was saying he was washed up. They were just saying the team didn't play well 2 years ago.
Right. But he, like many other great athletes, build a straw man.
Sure. Oh yeah. I mean,
discussion.
Tom Brady has done that.
Tom Brady does it
virtually his whole career.
Yeah. I mean, the Patriots from 2003, or at least as soon as Rodney Harrison showed up, for the next 5 years, Rodney Harrison painted the picture that the Patriots were, 2 touchdown underdogs in every game, even though they won like 83% of their games.
Yeah, so, I get using it to fuel you, but I think that when you're saying you literally get burner accounts like Kevin Durant to lash out at fans on Twitter who have 15 followers who criticize you,
bad.
Then you need to, take a step back and say, what am I getting so upset about? Really, who cares?
Right. No, they're very sensitive. And I'm thinking one player who seems to handle it pretty well, but he's not a superstar. He's gone back and forth with the crew on TNT, but he doesn't go silent with them, as Draymond Green. Remember, he had the back and
he'll
forth
fight
with
back.
Charles Barkley.
Yeah, he'll fight back.
Which I like. But see,
I'd rather you fight back than be passive aggressive.
Or do like Durant, who wouldn't answer questions and just sat there and said yes, no.
You know who are pretty good about the criticism? This is shocking. The European players don't mind it.
Yes.
And also don't mind being heckled, because in Europe, if you look at the soccer games or the basketball games, there's no rules for fans. No. They'll go over the line. They don't care. No regulation. They won't toss you. It is bonkers. I know soccer has that reputation fairly, but if you look at some of the European basketball games, it is raucous and they are in your face and they are screaming at you. Like, I don't think this sort of stuff or criticism phases like Doncic or Jokic or even Giannis at all.
No.
I don't think it bothers them one bit. And I can't say the same about a lot of these American players. And the reputation of the European players for years was, they're soft. They can't deal with the NBA. They're actually some of the least soft players now in the league is these European guys.
Yeah, one is being soft or, powerful on the court. The other one is being soft off the court. 2 totally different things, right? So, and Draymond Green's an interesting case because he played in college for 4 years. He played at Michigan State, which is a really tough culture. Tom Izzo builds a really tough culture there. He also was a second-round pick. Tough place, and he was a second-round pick, and he's kind of an undersized player who's had to work his ass off to be as good as he is. So he doesn't fit the normal profile for a great NBA player who, again, was heavily recruited, played 1 year of college. So when they get to the NBA, they're not as mature as, say, a guy who went 4 years in school. I'm thinking back to like Tim Duncan. Probably nothing bothered him. I think Tim Duncan, you could probably pour hot oil on him and it wouldn't impact him. He had the
hard
best
guy to
temperament.
heckle. Like, what are you going to heckle? Your game's boring. That's the best.
Right? Yeah. It's come on, dunk the ball, Tim. Why do you bank in your shot all the time?
Like, you can get on LeBron for a ton of stuff. Like, be like, LeBron, how are you such a bad free throw shooter? Or like, complaining to your baby, you complain to the refs. Like, Tim Duncan didn't even talk to the refs. He would shoot like 15 of 18 from the floor.
Yeah, that's true. So
just win a championship. Like, what are you supposed to say to the guy?
His nickname was the Big Fundamental. Come on.
I don't like the way you dress, Tim Duncan. It's very boring. Not flashy enough.
He used to shop at Target.
Yeah,
nothing. Yeah, so he's
was
a guy
heckle proof.
He was, because he was just kind of there. Like, he was. And to me, he's one of the, I have him as the 8th greatest player in the history of the sport.
Yeah, which is funny. He didn't even sniff our influential list, despite being better than a lot of players on that
better
list.
Than most everybody on the list. When people say you have him 8th and I have him slightly above Kobe.
Yeah, I have him above Kobe and Shaq on my list. So.
Yeah, because he won as many championships as Kobe, won more than Shaq, and he never derailed his team. And may rest in peace, Kobe Bryant. But Kobe kind of quit on the Lakers, was ready to force a trade. Made in like 50 wins every year, and really, what have the Spurs done since he left? I always compared Duncan to Tom Brady, right? Because Tom Brady was the guy who was 20 years in New England and took the coaching of Bill Belichick. Same thing with Tim Duncan, close to 20 years in San Antonio and took the coaching of Greg Popovich. Those 2 coaches look a lot better when those 2 players are your star player, because you can set the culture because the best player accepts that. And I always compared Duncan to Tom Brady. I think Tom Brady now obviously surpassed Duncan.
He's done things that in football Duncan wasn't able to do in basketball.
Yeah, Tom Brady is in the discussion of the greatest team sport athlete ever. I mean, if he wins another Super Bowl, he's starting to approach Bill Russell as a winner. I mean, he would surpass Jordan in championships.
Believe me, knowing him, he knows that number that Bill Russell has.
Sure. Yeah, he's
crazy enough to think he can get it.
What else is he going to do? He's, again, another guy who's a sociopath. I think you look at seriously, in a way, it's derogatory, but in a way, it's a compliment. LeBron's not a sociopath, and that may be why some people won't put him up there with LeBron, with Michael Jordan. Jordan, Kobe, Tom Brady, I think Barry Bonds. These guys were sociopaths. Like, there was just something off about them that may not have made them great human beings, but makes them incredible in the sport that they play.
Yeah, singularly focused on their craft.
Exactly. I mean, LeBron's got other, interests. My guy Aaron Rodgers got other interests.
You can't be that successful without that type of laser focus. You can't.
It's like that in business, right? Yeah. I mean, whether it be Steve Jobs or whoever else, that Elon Musk, people that have been successful in big business, Jeff Bezos, although I can't stand him, but obviously he's worth $200 billion. So
yeah, well, he's stepping down right now. So.
He's stepping down now, and the stock went down. But those types of people, they're just wired differently than the rest of us. Like, they're possessed.
Yeah. So I want to end the show with how we usually end it, Sap. We can go through this quickly because we're running a little bit over. Just our top 5 right now in the NBA. Sure. You don't have to give a long explanation for any of the teams if you don't want to. Why don't you do it in inverse order so we have some suspense?
Okay. Number 5 is the Utah Jazz, who are, as of this recording, 16-5, playing excellent basketball. There's a 10-game winning streak in there. So, again, be what you want to make of that. I think they're a really good basketball team. I don't think they're a true title contender. I have the Nets at number 4. When they're on, they're damn scary. They still don't play good enough defense for my liking. Their 2 biggest wins this year over Milwaukee and Philadelphia were nail-biters because they don't play defense. Number 3 is the 76ers. They're playing excellent basketball. You see the improvement because of Doc Rivers as the head coach and the way they surrounded players around Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Number 2 is the Clippers, and number 1 is the Lakers. Last year, for the entire season, I thought the Lakers and the Clippers were the 2 best teams, and I still think they're the 2 best teams. And the thing that I think separates the Lakers from a lot of the other teams, they rebound so well and they play great defense. Now, they sometimes go through some stretches offensively where they're not very efficient. But when you play defense and rebound like they do, you're going to be in every game and you're going to avoid losing streaks. So I have the Lakers at 1 and the Clippers at 2.
We have the same teams in the top 5, just in slightly different order. I think it's actually kind of hard to argue that those aren't the top 5 teams. Mm-hmm. Maybe with the exception of Milwaukee, you might want to put in there. I don't have them in, though, right now. I have the Jazz at 5 as well. I don't think I would be surprised if they made a lot of noise in the Western Conference. I don't think they're a Western Conference Finals team. I think they very well may lose in the first round, but they're playing great basketball right now, so they deserve their due. The 76ers at 4, their starting lineup, I saw this today. When they have their starting 5, they're undefeated. I believe they're 10-0 when they have their starting 5 of Embiid, Simmons, Curry, and whoever the hell else they're throwing out in there.
Tobias
Harris and somebody else. And then so I like obviously the way they're playing. I would vote for Doc Rivers as coach of the year right now. Mm-hmm. He's done a tremendous job there. I have the Clippers at 3. Mm-hmm. They're just a well-oiled machine right now. They're playing really well. You know about the 2 guys they have. Paul George has rebounded from his terrible bubble performance. 2, I have the Nets. They don't play any defense, but they also score 150 points. So kind of hard to outscore 3 guys who can score 50 on any given night. So far, it seems to be working with the ball sharing thing, though the guy who is taking the most shots is Kyrie, who would be the guy who I'd want to take the least amount of shots of those 3. We'll see if that changes, but it's working right now for the most part. The defense isn't – I don't expect the defense to get better in the regular season. I think it'll probably get better in the playoffs. They don't give 2 damns about playing defense right now. No. They're not going to. They're just going to try to score 150 points every night. And then 1 is the Lakers. I think until a team makes a pretty clear and obvious case that they're the best team, the Lakers remain at 1. They've done nothing to dissuade me from that. And so they're the defending champion. They stay at 1. They haven't done anything to convince me that they're not the best team in basketball right now.
Yeah, again, because of what they do on the defensive end and how strong they are on the boards, I think that they still need one more big. I wish they had re-signed Dwight Howard because he gave them some edge, some physicality that they're not getting from Marc Gasol. And again, we know that the trade deadline is March 25th. These contending teams are all going to make some move by the trade deadline. I think the Lakers will address getting a big to help them out and maybe a 3-and-D guy, which every team is always looking for. So I think it's going to be a fascinating year because I don't see any really perfect team. There's no team in the league that's similar to what Golden State was for nearly 3 years with Durant, Steph Curry, and Klay Thompson. I mean, if Durant and Klay Thompson don't get hurt, they three-peat. I mean, they beat Toronto in the finals.
Probably.
There's no team that's that good, that nearly unbeatable. There's a lot of really good teams, though. And again, it's going to be a fascinating playoff, especially in the East now because of the Nets and 76ers. Milwaukee's still there, and see whatever the Celtics do by the trade deadline and add some talent.
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty much a wide open playoffs with the outside of the expectation that the Lakers will certainly get to the conference finals.
Mm-hmm.
The Clippers should, but again, last year the bubble showed that they might not. But I think that's the only thing you can put in permanent marker right now is that I would say the Lakers and the Nets will both be in the conference finals. Right. I would bet the house on that. Mm-hmm. I just don't see anybody knocking them out beforehand. I don't think they'll play a good enough team to knock them out beforehand. Unless the Lakers somehow play the Clippers in the second round, but I don't think that's how it's going to shake out.
Yeah, I mean, the Lakers have 2 of the top 5 players in the league. The Clippers have one of the top 5 players in the league and another guy who's, a top 10 player, especially the way he's playing this year. And you look at the Nets, they have, in my opinion, the second best player in the league, and Kevin Durant. Harden's a top 8 player. And Kyrie, when focused and motivated, is unstoppable. So, yeah, I mean, we're talking about 3 teams with, a grand total of 7 of the top 15 players in the league. So talent wins in the NBA. You're going to have systems and coaches and role players. It's the big boys that step up in the biggest moments that determine who wins.
All right, Sap, before we get out, because we did talk about a little bit about football, you don't even have to give an explanation. Who's your pick in the Super Bowl?
When when the games were played, the conference championship, and it was Kansas City and Tampa Bay, and after I got out of a catatonic state because my Packers didn't make it, they had every opportunity to win the NFC Championship game. My guy had to play a little bit better. If he did, they would have won. Originally, I'm like, Kansas City should win handily. But now Kansas City doesn't have their 2 starting offensive tackles in Eric Fisher and Jeff Schwartz. And that's going to be a problem because Tampa Bay can put pressure on the quarterback without sending extra rushers. They sacked Aaron Rodgers 5 times in the NFC Championship games. And Mahomes is more mobile now than Aaron Rodgers.
And can throw with 2 hands, Sap.
He can throw with 2 hands. Yeah, Aaron just sticks to the right hand. I think Tampa's going to win this game. I think the weather's going to factor into this. It's going to slow down the track team of the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think that pass rush of Tampa Bay is going to cause problems for Kansas City. I think it's going to be lower scoring than most people anticipate. I'm going to go Tampa Bay 27, Kansas City 24. Same score as their regular season game, except Tampa's going to win this, and Brady gets his 7th Super Bowl.
I am rooting for the Bucs because I'm rooting for Brady. Though I just think that I've said this all along. I don't see a team beating the Chiefs in a meaningful game. I think when they're locked in, they're just. I don't know how you stop the offense. They have 2 guys who I think you can make a strong case for the best at their position 3 guys who are the best at their position in football. Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey. I just don't know how you account for all of that. It's like when if the Patriots had Moss and Gronk both in their primes at the same time. Exactly. And that's basically what the Chiefs are doing. I just don't know how you stop it. So I think it'll be a good game. I'll say Kansas City 24, Buccaneers 20.
Oh, you're going low scoring too. I think there's a 75% chance of rain. We know in Florida, the rain just appears and it can just.
I hope it rains. That'll be fun.
Change the game.
I like.
Yeah, it'll be interesting, and we'll see who can run the football. I mean,
not allowed to fire the cannons, though. They said.
They cannot. They will not be allowed.
Got
to
be neutral.
The cannons.
Even though there's a giant pirate ship there.
Yeah. Can you remove the pirate ship to be interesting? I'm not necessarily looking real forward because I'm still again depressed that the Packers didn't make it.
You got to move on, Sap. It happens.
I do. That's true. I need to up the Prozac at some point. But I think when I look at this too, because I've always, but I always have this factor into my guys, right? So
you hate Tom Brady. We know that.
Well, no, I don't hate Tom Brady. I hate Tom Brady fans. So if Brady wins his 7th, he'll have 3 more than LeBron, which, is problematic for me.
It's still insane.
Of course it's insane. If Mahomes wins a second one, we know that the overreaction is going to be
it's going to be
vomit
incessant.
work. And I love Mahomes, but they're going to say this guy's the greatest quarterback
already
ever.
Bad.
And he'll have 1 more than Rodgers, who's been around a lot longer. So I'm hoping for a tie, but that can't happen.
No tie.
No tie. So I just hope for a good game.
All right, Sap, we will get back next week with more NBA stuff. I'll see if our Super Bowl predictions held up at all. And, one of ours will, because we took opposite teams. So one of us will look good. The other one will look less good. There'll be plenty of NBA stuff to talk about next week, including some of the early All-Star returns, see how those ballots are looking. And I'm sure there will be some more drama, maybe with some people sitting courtside at other games. You never know. All right, Sap, thank you, my friend. And we will talk to you later next week. As always, this has been Jet Stryer and John Sapichetti for the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage.